The chamber of the Galactic Alliance was a place that seemed designed to crush the spirit of anyone who entered it. Captain Alex Turner felt the weight of its vastness as he stepped inside, his boots clicking softly against the polished obsidian floor. The walls were made of a shimmering, translucent material that pulsed faintly with light, as if the room itself were alive, watching. High above, the ceiling disappeared into a haze of blue mist, giving the unsettling impression that the chamber stretched into infinity. Surrounding the room were 12 elevated platforms, each occupied by a representative of one of the ruling species of the galaxy. Their forms were varied and strange, some towering and insectoid, others small and crystalline, their bodies refracting light like prisms. Each alien looked down at Alex and diplomat Sarah Mitchell with a mixture of disdain and amusement. Alex clenched his jaw as he and Sarah stepped into the center of the chamber, a small circular platform designed to make the occupants feel exposed and insignificant. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of energy coursing through the walls. Sarah, ever the professional, stood tall beside him, her diplomatic robes pristine and her expression calm. But Alex could see the tension in her shoulders, the way her hands were clasped just a little too tightly in front of her. She was nervous, though she hid it well. From the largest platform, a hulking alien with scaled, obsidian black skin and glowing yellow eyes leaned forward. This was Supreme Chancellor Vexer, leader of the Alliance's military council. His voice rumbled like distant thunder as he spoke, each word dripping with condescension. "Humans," he began, letting the word hang in the air like a bad taste. "Your species has been granted the privilege of existence within the outer fringes of the galaxy. You have been permitted to mine your asteroids, to farm your barren worlds, and to live under the protection of our benevolence. Yet now, you overstep your bounds." Alex's fists clenched at his sides, his knuckles white. He forced himself to remain silent, but the muscles in his jaw twitched as he ground his teeth. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady but soft. "Supreme Chancellor, the Zeta system has been home to human colonies for over 40 years. Families have built their lives there. Entire communities dash." Silence. Vexer's voice boomed, cutting her off. The chamber echoed with the sound, and Alex felt his chest tighten with anger. Vexer's yellow eyes narrowed as he continued. "The Zeta system contains quantum resources far too dangerous for a primitive species like yours to handle. You will evacuate your colonies within 30 standard days. Any humans remaining after that will be relocated." The word hung in the air, heavy with implication. Alex's stomach churned as he realized what Vexer meant. Relocated. Enslaved. The millions of people living in the Zeta system would be torn from their homes and forced into labor camps, their lives reduced to servitude under alien rule. Another alien spoke, this one resembling a grotesque fusion of metal and flesh, its voice a grating, mechanical rasp. "Consider yourselves fortunate. We could simply destroy your colonies and be done with it. But we are merciful. You will work for the betterment of the galaxy. It is more than you deserve." Laughter rippled through the chamber, a chilling sound that came in clicks, hisses, and guttural growls from the various alien representatives. To them, this was a joke, a casual discussion about the fate of an entire species. Alex's vision blurred with rage. He wanted to shout, to demand they show some humanity, some decency, but Sarah's hand brushed his arm, a subtle reminder to stay quiet. Her touch was light, but it grounded him, pulling him back from the edge. Sarah took a deep breath and spoke again, her voice calm but firm. "Supreme Chancellor, the Zeta colonies are not just resource outposts. They are homes. There are children there, families dash. Enough. Vexer snapped, his scaled hand slamming down on the armrest of his throne. Your species will comply, or we will take corrective action. Your ships are laughable, your weapons are toys compared to ours. If you resist, we will turn your worlds to ash. Alex couldn't stay silent any longer. His voice was low, but it carried an edge of defiance. You talk about mercy, but all I hear is arrogance. You think we're nothing, but you have no idea what we're capable of. The chamber fell silent. Every alien I turned to him, some glowing, others unblinking. Vexer's lips curled into a cruel smile, revealing rows of sharp, serrated teeth. Is that a threat, human? Do you truly believe your kind can stand against the might of the Galactic Alliance? Sarah stepped in quickly, her tone sharp but diplomatic. Captain Turner speaks out of frustration, Supreme Chancellor. We will, of course, take your demands back to our leaders for discussion. Vexer leaned back in his throne, his smile widening. Discuss all you like. The decision has been made. Guards, escort them back to their ship. As Alex and Sarah were led out of the chamber by two towering insectoid guards, Alex's mind raced. The aliens' arrogance was infuriating, but it also revealed something important. They underestimated humanity. They believed humans were weak, incapable of innovation or resistance. They didn't know about the secret project Dr. Emily Carter had been working on for years. As they walked down the crystalline corridors of the Alliance station, Alex glanced at Sarah. She looked calm, but he could see the faint tremor in her hands. She was trying to hold it together, but the weight of what they had just witnessed was crushing. They're planning to enslave millions, Alex said quietly, his voice trembling with barely restrained fury. And they think we'll just roll over and let it happen. Sarah's voice was soft, almost a whisper. They don't see us as equals, Alex. To them, we're just animals. Alex's mind flashed back to the strange message he'd received from Dr. Carter months ago. She had asked him questions about alien ship designs, about their weaknesses, their blind spots. At the time, he thought it was just another of her eccentric research projects. But now, he wondered. Had she known this day would come? Had humanity been preparing for this all along? As they boarded their small diplomatic vessel and prepared to return to Earth, Alex looked out the viewport at the stars. The Galactic Alliance thought humanity was weak, but they didn't know the truth. They didn't know about the fleet. And when the time came, they would learn. The air in the underground chamber was heavy with tension, the kind that clings to the skin and makes every breath feel like a labor. The room was dimly lit, the walls carved from dark stone that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. A circular table sat at the center, its surface made of polished obsidian, so smooth it mirrored the faces of those seated around it. At the head of the table sat President Laura Hayes, her sharp eyes scanning the room, searching for answers, for hope, for anything that could save humanity from the crushing weight of the Galactic Alliance's ultimatum. The silence was broken by the sound of a door sliding open. All eyes turned as Dr. Emily Carter entered the room, her figure a stark contrast to the grim atmosphere. She was small, almost frail-looking, with a cascade of silver hair tied neatly behind her head. But her presence was commanding, her eyes sharp and alive with an intensity that made even the most seasoned military leaders sit up straighter. She carried a small device in her hand, a sleek black disc that pulsed faintly with blue light. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice calm but filled with a quiet urgency. "For years, humanity has been underestimated. The Galactic Alliance sees us as nothing more than a nuisance, a species barely worthy of their attention. They believe we are weak, that we lack the power to resist. But today, I am here to show you that they are wrong. She placed the black disc in the center of the table and pressed her hand against its surface. Instantly, the room was bathed in a soft blue glow as a holographic projection sprang to life above the table. Gasps filled the room as the image of a ship appeared, sleek and otherworldly. Its surface was a deep, liquid black that seemed to drink in the light around it, giving it an almost ghostly appearance. The ship's edges shimmered and blurred, as if it were not entirely bound by the laws of this reality. This, Dr. Carter said, her voice steady, is the Vanguard, the first of humanity's quantum fleet. For over a decade, we have been working in secret, building these ships in hidden facilities across the solar system. What you see here is not just a ship. It is a weapon, a shield, and a message to the galaxy that humanity will not bow to tyranny. The holographic ship began to rotate, revealing its intricate design. Its hull was smooth, seamless, with no visible seams or rivets. Along its sides, faint lines of blue light pulsed rhythmically, like the heartbeat of a living creature. The room was silent, the leaders captivated by the sight. These ships, Dr. Carter continued, are equipped with quantum phase technology. They can shift in and out of normal space, making them impossible to target with conventional weapons. Their hulls are reinforced with a material that can absorb and redirect energy, rendering them nearly indestructible. And their weapons, she paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Their weapons can erase matter at the quantum level. Entire fleets can be reduced to nothing in seconds. The room erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped as the leaders tried to process what they were hearing. Some were filled with awe, others with disbelief. General Marcus Steele, a grizzled veteran with a voice like gravel, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You're telling me we've had this kind of power all along? And we've done nothing with it?" Dr. Carter met his gaze, unflinching. "We've been waiting. Building. Preparing. The Galactic Alliance has ruled this galaxy for thousands of years. We couldn't afford to reveal our hand until we were ready. And now, we are." President Hayes raised a hand, silencing the room. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes burned with a quiet determination. "How many ships?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Dr. Carter hesitated for a moment before answering. 12. Each one more powerful than anything the galaxy has ever seen. They are fully operational and ready for deployment. Another wave of murmurs rippled through the room. 12 ships. It didn't sound like much against the might of the Galactic Alliance's fleets, but as the leaders studied the holographic projection, they began to understand. These weren't just ships. They were something else entirely. Something the galaxy wasn't prepared for. President Hayes leaned back in her chair, her fingers steepled in front of her face. Her mind raced as she considered the implications. This fleet could change everything. It could save humanity or it could plunge them into a war they couldn't win. The weight of the decision pressed down on her, but she knew there was no other choice. "We can't let them enslave us," she said finally, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We can't let them destroy everything we built, everything we stand for. If we bow to them now, we will never stand again." She turned to Dr. Carter, her eyes fierce. "Deploy the fleet. Humanity will not be their slaves." Dr. Carter nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "As you wish, Madam President." The room fell silent once more as the weight of the decision settled over them. For the first time in decades, humanity was no longer on the defensive. They had a weapon, a chance to fight back. But with that power came an overwhelming sense of responsibility. The leaders exchanged glances, their expressions a mixture of hope and fear. As the hologram faded and the room was plunged back into darkness, President Hayes rose to her feet. She looked around the table, meeting the eyes of each leader in turn. "This is our moment," she said, her voice steady and resolute. "The galaxy thinks we are weak. They think we are broken. But they are wrong. We will show them what humanity is capable of. And we will not falter." The leaders nodded, their resolve hardening. They had been given a weapon, a chance to fight for their survival. And they would use it. For their people. For their future. For humanity. The Zeta colonies were once a beacon of human resilience, their sprawling cities carved into the rocky surfaces of planets and moons that orbited the system's twin suns. Vast domes of shimmering glass protected the settlements from the harsh vacuum of space, while towering spires reached toward the heavens, a testament to humanity's determination to thrive in the face of adversity. But now, those same cities burned, their beauty swallowed by the relentless onslaught of the Galactic Alliance. From her vantage point deep within a hidden shelter beneath the surface of Zeta Prime, Commander Nina Torres could feel the ground tremble as the alien fleet rained destruction from the skies. The shelter was cold, damp, and dimly lit by flickering emergency lights, but none of that mattered. All Nina could focus on was the distant, muffled roar of explosions above, each one a cruel reminder of the devastation unfolding on the surface. The Galactic Alliance had come in force. Their fleet of 800 warships blotted out the stars, their sleek, menacing forms gliding through the void like predators circling their prey. Each ship was a masterpiece of alien engineering, bristling with weapons that could level entire cities in a single strike. And they used those weapons without hesitation. From the safety of orbit, they unleashed beams of searing energy that cut through the atmosphere like knives, striking the settlements below with pinpoint accuracy. Nina had seen the aftermath on the monitors before the power had failed. Entire blocks reduced to molten craters, their edges glowing red-hot as the ground itself turned to glass. Buildings that had taken decades to construct were wiped from existence in an instant, their remains scattered as ash on the wind. She had watched as the colony's central hub, once a bustling center of commerce and culture, was obliterated in a single, blinding flash of light. Even now, she could still see it in her mind's eye, the image burned into her memory. Her fists clenched at her sides as she paced the narrow confines of the shelter. She wanted to fight, to do something, anything, to stop the slaughter. But there was nothing she could do. The Zeta system's meager defenses had been overwhelmed within minutes, their outdated ships no match for the Alliance's superior technology. Now, all she could do was wait. In her hand, she clutched a small datapad, its screen cracked but still functional. On it was the last message she had received from Earth Defense Command before the communications network had gone dark: "Help is coming soon. Hold the line." The words echoed in her mind, a fragile thread of hope she clung to with all her strength. But as the hours dragged on and the destruction above continued unabated, that hope began to waver. The shelter was filled with the quiet sounds of fear. The other survivors, engineers, miners, and their families huddled together in the corners, their faces pale and drawn. Children cried softly, their parents whispering futile reassurances. Nina's heart ached for them, but she couldn't bring herself to speak. What could she say? That everything would be fine? That Earth would send reinforcements in time? She didn't know if she believed that herself. Above, the Galactic Alliance fleet moved with cold precision, their confidence unshakable. They had no reason to doubt their victory. Humanity was weak, a minor nuisance to be crushed beneath their heel. Their commanders watched the destruction unfold from the bridges of their ships, their alien faces twisted in expressions of satisfaction. To them, this was not war. It was extermination. But as the fleet continued its assault, something began to change. Strange energy readings began to ripple through the asteroid belt that bordered the Zeta system, faint at first but growing stronger with each passing moment. The Alliance's sensors picked up the anomalies, their instruments struggling to make sense of the data. The energy signatures were unlike anything they had encountered before, unstable, shifting, and impossibly complex. On the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion, Supreme Commander Vexer observed the readings with a mixture of curiosity and irritation. His scaled fingers tapped against the armrest of his throne as he studied the holographic display before him. "What is the source of these readings?" he demanded, his voice a low growl that sent shivers through his crew. One of his officers, a thin, insectoid creature with multifaceted eyes, hesitated before responding. "Uncertain, Supreme Commander. The energy signatures are erratic. They appear to be originating from within the asteroid belt, but we cannot determine their nature." Vexer's eyes narrowed, his yellow irises glowing faintly in the dim light. "Send a scout to investigate. I want answers." As the order was relayed, Nina sat in the darkness of the shelter, her mind racing. She didn't know what was happening in the asteroid belt, but she could feel it. Something was coming. The air seemed charged with an unexplainable energy, a tingling sensation that set her nerves on edge. It was as if the very fabric of reality was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. The survivors in the shelter began to stir, their fear giving way to a strange, uneasy anticipation. Even the children stopped crying, their wide eyes darting around the room as if they could sense the shift in the air. Nina gripped the data pad tighter, her knuckles white. "Help is coming soon." The words repeated in her mind like a mantra, a fragile shield against the despair threatening to consume her. In the asteroid belt, the energy readings reached a crescendo. The void seemed to ripple and distort, as if space itself were being pulled apart. And then, with a blinding flash of light, they appeared. From the depths of the belt, the Vanguard fleet emerged, their sleek, black forms shimmering as they phased into normal space. The ships moved like shadows, their hulls bending and distorting the light around them, making them almost impossible to see. They were silent, their engines emitting no sound, no traceable energy signature. To the Galactic Alliance fleet, they appeared as ghosts, phantoms rising from the darkness. On the Eternal Dominion, alarms blared as the Vanguard fleet was detected. Vexer rose from his throne, his eyes narrowing as he stared at the display. "What is this?" he hissed, his voice filled with disbelief. "How did they dash?" Before he could finish, the Vanguard fleet opened fire. Beams of pure, unfathomable energy lanced out from their ships, striking the nearest Alliance warships with devastating precision. The beams didn't just destroy, they erased. The ships caught in their path simply ceased to exist, their matter disintegrated at the quantum level. In an instant, the balance of power shifted. In the shelter, Nina felt the ground tremble again, but this time it was different. The explosions were distant, muted, and accompanied by a strange, rhythmic vibration that seemed to resonate deep within her chest. She looked up, her breath catching in her throat. "They're here," she whispered, a mixture of awe and relief flooding her voice. "The fleet is here." For the first time in days, hope sparked in Nina's heart. Humanity wasn't finished. The Galactic Alliance had made a grave mistake. And now, they would learn the truth. Earth had been preparing for this moment all along. The void of space shimmered unnaturally, as if reality itself was stretching, bending, and holding its breath. Then, with a soundless ripple that seemed to echo in the soul rather than the ears, they appeared. Humanity's quantum fleet phased into existence, their sleek, black forms emerging from the fabric of space like shadows stepping into the light. Each ship was a masterpiece of design, their surfaces smooth and seamless, absorbing the faint starlight and bending it around them. They moved with a grace that was almost unnatural, gliding silently into position as if they were hunting predators closing in on their prey. The Galactic Alliance Armada, a force of 800 warships that had once seemed invincible, now found itself surrounded. The Vanguard fleet encircled them with precision, their formation tight and unyielding. For a moment, the two forces floated in eerie silence, the vastness of space amplifying the tension. On the bridge of the flagship Eternal Dominion, Admiral Zarek stared at the holographic display, his reptilian eyes narrowing as he processed the impossible sight before him. What are those?" he hissed, his voice low and filled with disbelief. His officers, a mix of alien species with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes, scrambled to analyze the new arrivals. But their instruments provided no answers. The quantum fleet registered as little more than faint distortions, as if they weren't truly there. "Supreme Commander," one of the officers stammered, their voice trembling, "our scans can't lock onto them. Their energy signatures are unstable. They're phasing in and out of detectable space." Admiral Zarek slammed a clawed hand against the console, his frustration boiling over. "Fire on them. All ships, open fire. Show these primitives the might of the Galactic Alliance." The order was relayed, and within moments, the Alliance fleet unleashed their fury. Beams of searing energy and waves of plasma missiles streaked across the void, converging on the Vanguard fleet. For a brief moment, the galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath as the weapons closed the distance. And then, nothing. The energy beams passed straight through the human ships, their deadly light scattering harmlessly into the void. The missiles detonated prematurely, their explosions lighting up the darkness but leaving the Vanguard fleet untouched. It was as if the human ships weren't truly there, their forms flickering and shimmering like mirages. On the Eternal Dominion, silence fell over the bridge as the officers watched in stunned disbelief. Zarek's claws tightened around the armrests of his command chair, his confidence cracking under the weight of the impossible. "How?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. "How is this possible?" Before he could demand answers, the Vanguard fleet retaliated. Without warning, beams of pure, blinding energy lanced out from the human ships. The beams moved with terrifying precision, striking the Alliance warships one by one. But these weren't ordinary weapons. The moment the beams touched their targets, the alien ships didn't explode or crumble, they simply ceased to exist. Their matter was erased at the quantum level, leaving behind nothing but empty space where they had once been. The destruction was swift and absolute. The Alliance fleet, once so confident in its superiority, was being torn apart in minutes. Ships that had dominated the galaxy for centuries were reduced to nothingness, their crews vanishing without a trace. Panic spread like wildfire among the remaining ships as their captains realized the truth: they were powerless. Their weapons couldn't touch the Vanguard fleet, and their defenses were useless against the quantum beams. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, chaos erupted. Officers shouted over one another, their voices filled with fear and desperation. Zarek stood frozen, his mind racing as he tried to comprehend the nightmare unfolding before him. "This can't be happening," he muttered, his voice shaking. They're just humans. How could they dash? His words were cut off as another beam of light sliced through the void, erasing one of the Dominion's escort ships. The shock wave rattled the flagship, sending sparks flying from the consoles. Zurich stumbled, his claws digging into the armrest as he struggled to maintain his composure. For the first time in his long and decorated career, he felt the cold grip of fear. Meanwhile, aboard the Vanguard flagship Eclipse, Admiral Marcus Steele watched the battle unfold with calm determination. His weathered face was set in a grim expression, his piercing eyes reflecting the light of the holographic display before him. "Target the command ships," he ordered, his voice steady. "Let's end this." The Eclipse fired, its beam cutting through the darkness like a blade. The Eternal Dominion shuddered as the beam grazed its hull, tearing through its shields and leaving a gaping hole in its side. Alarms blared, and the bridge was bathed in red light as Zurich's officers scrambled to contain the damage. "Supreme Commander," one of them shouted. "Our shields are gone. We can't take another hit." Zurich's claws trembled as he stared at the display, the Vanguard fleet closing in on all sides. He knew they had lost. The Galactic Alliance, the undisputed rulers of the galaxy for millennia, had been brought to its knees by a species they had dismissed as insignificant. The humiliation was unbearable, but the alternative was annihilation. With a heavy heart, Zurich activated the communication link to the Vanguard fleet. The image of Admiral Steele appeared on the screen, his expression unreadable. Zurich bowed his head, his voice low and filled with bitter resignation. "We surrender," he said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "The Galactic Alliance surrenders." On the Eclipse, Steele nodded, his expression softening slightly. "Order your remaining ships to stand down," he replied. "No further blood needs to be shed." The message was relayed, and one by one, the Alliance ships powered down their weapons and engines. The battle was over. The invincible armada had been decimated, and not a single human life had been lost. For the first time in its long history, the Galactic Alliance had bowed to another species. As the Vanguard fleet held its position, the survivors aboard the Alliance ships watched in silence, their pride shattered and their confidence broken. They had underestimated humanity, and now they understood the price of their arrogance. Back on Earth, the news of the victory spread like wildfire. Across the colonies and the home world, people cheered and wept, their hearts swelling with pride and relief. Humanity had faced the greatest threat in its history and emerged victorious. The galaxy would never be the same again. For Admiral Steele and the Vanguard fleet, the battle was just the beginning. They had shown the galaxy what humanity was capable of, but they knew the road ahead would be long and fraught with challenges. Still, for the first time in generations, they felt a sense of hope. Humanity was no longer a victim. They were a force to be reckoned with. And the galaxy would never forget it. The war was over, but the galaxy still trembled under the weight of its aftermath. The once mighty Galactic Alliance, a coalition that had ruled for millennia with an iron grip, now stood fractured and humbled. Its fleets were in ruins, its leaders scattered, and its people questioning everything they had once believed. Where once there had been arrogance and dominance, now there was fear and hope. In the grand chamber of the Alliance's Central Council, the air was heavy with tension. The room, which had once been a symbol of power and control, now felt cold and hollow. The towering walls of polished obsidian seemed to loom over the delegates, their reflective surfaces casting distorted images of the gathered representatives. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the faint hum of energy fields that kept the chamber secure. At the center of the room, two figures stood tall and unyielding, Diplomat Mitchell and Captain Turner. They were representatives of humanity, but more than that, they were the embodiment of its newfound strength. Mitchell, with her calm demeanor and piercing gaze, carried herself with the poise of someone who understood the weight of her words. Turner, a veteran of countless battles, stood beside her like a sentinel, his presence a silent reminder of humanity's resilience. The gathered delegates, an array of alien species with forms as varied as the stars themselves, watched them with a mixture of curiosity, fear, and resentment. These were the beings who had once dismissed humanity as insignificant, who had viewed Earth as nothing more than a backwater planet. Now, they sat in silence, waiting to hear the terms of their surrender. Mitchell stepped forward, her voice steady and clear as it echoed through the chamber. The Galactic Alliance, as it stands, is no longer viable, she began, her words cutting through the air like a blade. Its foundation was built on inequality, on the exploitation of weaker species, and on the belief that might makes right. That era is over. There was a murmur among the delegates, but no one dared to interrupt. Mitchell's gaze swept across the room, her expression unyielding. Humanity does not seek to rule through fear or domination. We have seen what that path leads to, and we reject it. Instead, we propose the formation of a galactic congress, a body where all species, regardless of their size or strength, have equal representation. A place where decisions are made through cooperation, not coercion. The chamber erupted into whispers, the delegates exchanging uncertain glances. The idea was radical, almost unimaginable. For centuries, the Galactic Alliance had been the ultimate authority, its will enforced by its fleets and its power unquestioned. To dissolve it and replace it with a Congress of Equals was to undo the very fabric of galactic politics. One of the delegates, a towering insectoid being with shimmering carapace, rose to speak. "And what of humanity?" it asked, its voice clicking and buzzing. "You have proven your strength. What guarantees do we have that you will not use your power to dominate us, as the Alliance once did?" Mitchell's expression softened, and she nodded. "A fair question," she said. "Humanity has no desire to rule. Instead, we offer something far greater: cooperation. We are willing to share our quantum technology under strict conditions to ensure that no single species can ever threaten the galaxy again. This technology will be used not for war, but for peace." The murmurs grew louder, but this time there was a note of hope in the voices of the delegates. Mitchell raised her hand, and the room fell silent once more. "Let me show you what we mean," she said. The holographic displays around the chamber flickered to life, projecting images from Earth's shipyards. The delegates watched in awe as scenes of incredible technological feats unfolded before them. Massive ships, their sleek forms glowing with the faint light of quantum energy, emerged from the docks. But these were not warships. They were vessels of peace. One image showed a barren, lifeless planet being transformed. Quantum terraforming machines descended from orbit, their energy fields reshaping the landscape. Deserts bloomed into lush forests, rivers carved their way through the dry earth, and the atmosphere thickened with clouds that brought life-giving rain. In mere moments, a dead world had been reborn. Another image showed a fleet of quantum ships delivering supplies to a war-torn colony. Crates of food and medicine were unloaded with precision, their contents distributed to the starving and the sick. The gratitude on the faces of the colonists was unmistakable, their despair replaced with hope. The final image was perhaps the most powerful. A team of human engineers worked alongside alien scientists to repair a planet that had been devastated by the war. Together, they rebuilt cities, restored ecosystems, and brought light back to a world that had been shrouded in darkness. The message was clear: humanity's strength lay not in its ability to destroy, but in its capacity to heal. As the images faded, the chamber was silent once more. But this time, the silence was not born of fear or tension. It was the silence of understanding, of a shared realization that the galaxy could be something greater than it had ever been. Mitchell turned back to the delegates, her voice filled with quiet determination. "This is the future we offer," she said. "A future where no species lives in fear. A future where we work together to build something greater than any of us could achieve alone. The choice is yours." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then, one by one, the delegates began to rise. Some bowed their heads in agreement, others raised their hands in a gesture of solidarity. Even the most reluctant among them could not deny the power of what they had seen. Humanity had proven itself, not through domination, but through compassion. It had risen from the ashes of its own struggles to become a beacon of hope for the galaxy. And in doing so, it had reminded the other species of something they had long forgotten, that true strength lies not in the ability to conquer, but in the willingness to uplift. As the session came to an end, Captain Turner looked at Mitchell, a rare smile breaking across his battle-hardened face. "Do you think they'll keep their word?" he asked. Mitchell glanced at the delegates, her expression thoughtful. "Perhaps," she said. "But even if they don't, we've shown them what's possible. And sometimes, that's enough to start something new." Beyond the chamber, the galaxy watched and waited. The old order had fallen, and a new era was beginning. For the first time in generations, there was a sense of hope, a belief that the future could be different. And at the heart of it all was humanity, a species that had chosen to lead not through fear, but through the promise of a better tomorrow. The galaxy was quiet, but it was not at peace. Beneath the surface of newfound cooperation, shadows stirred. The dissolution of the Galactic Alliance had left a void, and while many species embraced the promise of equality and unity, others clung to the remnants of the old order. For them, humanity's rise was not a beacon of hope, it was an affront to the natural hierarchy they had spent centuries enforcing. In the dark corners of forgotten worlds, whispers spread like wildfire. Exiled Alliance loyalists, those who had refused to bow to humanity's terms, gathered in secret. They were a mix of species, united not by shared ideals but by shared resentment. Their meetings were held in hidden chambers carved into asteroid bases, their words laced with venom and desperation. "We cannot allow this human experiment to continue," growled one of the conspirators, a hulking reptilian being with scales that glimmered like molten gold. His claws scraped against the metal table as he leaned forward, his eyes burning with fury. "They are weak. They preach peace, but they wield power that could destroy us all. It is only a matter of time before they use it to enslave us." Others nodded, their faces twisted with anger and fear. A slender insectoid chimed in, its voice clicking with agitation. "They have already begun sharing their technology," it said, its antennae twitching. "But under their conditions. They control who receives it, how it is used. It is not equality, it is tyranny masked as benevolence." In the shadows, plans began to form. Sabotage, espionage, assassination. The Loyalists knew they couldn't face humanity's quantum fleet directly, but they didn't need to. They would strike from within, sowing chaos and distrust until the fragile peace crumbled under its own weight. Far away, on a bustling station orbiting a vibrant blue planet, Commander Torres stood in silence, staring out at the stars. The weight of her responsibility pressed against her shoulders like an invisible force. Once a decorated officer in humanity's fleet, She had been reassigned to Galactic Intelligence, a role that demanded sharp instincts and unwavering vigilance. The peace humanity had fought for was fragile, and she was one of its unseen guardians. Behind her, holographic screens flickered, displaying intercepted communications, surveillance footage, and intelligence reports. The conspirators were careful, but not careful enough. Torres had been tracking them for weeks, piecing together their movements like fragments of a shattered mirror. She knew their names, their hideouts, their plans. But she also knew that stopping them wouldn't be simple. "They're growing bolder," said a voice behind her. Torres turned to see Agent Kren, a wiry man with sharp features and a mind as quick as lightning. He gestured to one of the screens, where a grainy image showed a supply depot engulfed in flames. This attack was coordinated. "They're testing us, seeing how far they can push before we respond." Torres frowned, her dark eyes narrowing as she studied the image. "They're not just testing us," she said, her voice low. "They're trying to send a message. They want the galaxy to see humanity as weak, incapable of maintaining order." Kren nodded, his expression grim. "What's the plan?" Torres turned back to the stars, her mind racing. "We stay ahead of them," she said. "We let them think they're winning, let them grow overconfident. And when the time comes, we strike not to destroy them, but to dismantle their network piece by piece. True peace isn't won through brute force. It's won through vigilance." The conspirators' next move came swiftly. A prominent diplomat advocating for the Galactic Congress was assassinated, his transport ship sabotaged mid-flight. The news spread like wildfire, shaking the fragile trust that had begun to form between species. Rumors of rebellion grew louder, and for the first time since the Congress's formation, humanity's leadership was openly questioned. Torres felt the pressure mounting. She knew the Loyalists were behind the attack, but proving it was another matter. The conspirators were careful to cover their tracks, leaving behind only whispers and shadows. But Torres was relentless. She pored over the data, searching for the faintest trace of their involvement. Finally, she found it: a single encrypted transmission intercepted by one of humanity's listening posts. The message was brief, but it was enough. It pointed to a hidden base on the outskirts of a dying star system, a place where the Loyalists had gathered to plan their next strike. Torres wasted no time. She assembled a team of operatives, each handpicked for their expertise in infiltration and espionage. Together, they boarded a stealth ship and set course for the star system, their mission clear: uncover the Loyalists' plans and ensure they never had the chance to act on them. The base was a labyrinth of tunnels carved into the rocky surface of an asteroid. Torres and her team moved silently, their footsteps muffled by the sound-dampening fields of their suits. The air was cold and stale, filled with the faint hum of machinery. In the distance, voices echoed low, urgent, and filled with malice. Torres signaled for her team to halt, her hand raised in a silent command. She crept forward, her pulse steady despite the tension in the air. As she rounded a corner, she saw them, the conspirators gathered around a holographic map, their faces lit by its eerie glow. They were discussing their next target, their voices dripping with hatred. "We'll hit the Congress itself," one of them said, his voice sharp and venomous. "A coordinated strike during their next session. Kill the representatives, destroy their trust, and the galaxy will fall into chaos." Torres felt a surge of anger, but she forced herself to stay calm. She signaled her team, and they moved into position, surrounding the room with precision. When the moment was right, Torres stepped forward, her weapon aimed at the conspirators. "It's over," she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. Surrender now, or face the consequences. The conspirators froze, their faces twisting with shock and fury. For a moment, it seemed they might resist, but then one by one, they dropped their weapons. They knew they were outmatched. Back on the station, Torres watched as the conspirators were escorted away, their plans dismantled and their network exposed. The galaxy had been spared another war, but Torres knew the fight was far from over. The Loyalists were only one threat among many, and the peace humanity had fought for would require constant vigilance. As she stared out at the stars once more, she felt a sense of resolve. Humanity had chosen a path of cooperation and equality, but it was not an easy path. There would always be those who sought to exploit the shared technology, to undermine the fragile trust that bound the galaxy together. But humanity was prepared. They had faced the darkness before, and they would face it again. True peace was not the absence of conflict. It was the willingness to defend what was right, to stand against those who sought to destroy it. And as long as there were guardians like Torres, the galaxy had a chance to thrive. The UES Aurora moved silently through the void, its sleek form gliding past the distant shimmer of a dying star. Within its hull, Captain Brooks stood on the command deck, his hands clasped behind his back as he stared out into the vast emptiness. His face was calm, his expression unreadable, but his mind was a storm of thoughts. The galaxy was watching, and every decision he made carried the weight of humanity's promise to the stars. The Aurora's mission was delicate. Two alien factions, ancient rivals, had brought their conflict to the edge of a fragile peace zone. The dispute was over a barren moon, a desolate rock of little value save for its symbolic importance. For centuries, it had been a flashpoint for bloodshed, and now, even in this new era of cooperation, old wounds bled anew. "Captain," said Lieutenant Hale, her voice steady but tinged with tension. "Both fleets are holding position, but their weapons are powered. They're waiting for the slightest excuse to fire." Brooks nodded, his gaze unwavering. "Open a channel to both commanders," he ordered, his voice firm yet calm. The bridge crew moved swiftly, their movements precise, their faces reflecting the same quiet determination as their captain. Moments later, the holographic images of two alien leaders flickered to life before him. One was a tall, insectoid being with chitinous armor that gleamed darkly in the dim light. The other was a squat, amphibian-like creature with slick, glistening skin and eyes that glared with suspicion. Both spoke at once, their voices clashing in a cacophony of accusations and demands. "Enough," Brooks said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. The two leaders fell silent, their gazes locking onto the human captain. There was something in his tone, not anger, but authority. A quiet strength that commanded attention. "This moon," Brooks began, his voice steady, "has been the cause of too much death. It is lifeless, barren, and yet you would spill more blood over it. Tell me, what will you gain? Another graveyard? Another scar on your histories?" The insectoid commander clicked its mandibles, its voice sharp. "It is a matter of honor. My people cannot yield. And mine cannot forget their losses," the amphibian leader croaked, its tone heavy with bitterness. Brooks took a step forward, his eyes hard but not unkind. "Honor and memory are important," he said. "But they cannot build a future. If you truly care for your people, you will find another way. Humanity offers its help not as rulers, but as mediators. Let us work together to find a solution that spares your people more pain." For a moment, there was silence. The tension on the bridge was palpable, the crew holding their breath as they watched the two leaders exchange glances. Finally, the insectoid spoke, its voice quieter now. "What do you propose, Captain?" Brooks allowed himself a small smile, though his expression remained serious. "A neutral zone," he said. "The moon will belong to no one. Humanity will oversee its protection, ensuring that neither side uses it as a weapon against the other. And in time, when trust has been rebuilt, you may decide its fate together." The amphibian leader croaked softly, its gaze thoughtful. "And if one side breaks this agreement?" Brooks' eyes hardened, his voice turning cold as steel. "Then they will face humanity's judgment. We will not tolerate those who threaten the peace." The two leaders exchanged a long look. Slowly, reluctantly, they nodded. The holograms faded, and the bridge crew let out a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. As the Aurora moved away from the disputed moon, Brooks stood alone on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. He felt the weight of his role pressing down on him, not just as a captain, but as a representative of humanity's ideals. He knew that their mercy had limits, that their patience could be tested. But for now, they had proven that power did not have to mean domination. That strength could be used to protect, not destroy. Still, a question lingered in his mind, one that he could not shake. How long could humanity walk this line between guardianship and control? And when the day came that their mercy was tested, would they be ready? Proxima Station hung in the void like a forgotten relic, its metal hull scarred by time and neglect. Once a bustling hub of commerce, it now served as the hidden base for the last remnants of the conspirators. Within its shadowy corridors, whispers of rebellion echoed, carried by voices filled with desperation and hatred. Torres moved silently through the station, her team close behind. The air was thick with tension, every step a calculated risk. The conspirators had grown bold, their latest plan a direct attack on humanity's phase technology, the very heart of the new galactic order. If they succeeded, they wouldn't just cripple humanity's ability to lead, they would plunge the galaxy back into chaos. Torres' heart pounded in her chest, but her face remained calm, her movements precise. She had spent weeks hunting these traitors, following their trail through the shadows. Now, at last, they were within reach. Ahead, the corridor opened into a vast chamber, its walls lined with machinery that hummed with stolen energy. In the center, a group of conspirators worked feverishly, their faces illuminated by the cold blue glow of a stolen quantum core. They were too close to activating their weapon. Torres raised her hand, signaling her team to halt. She studied the scene, her sharp eyes taking in every detail. The tension in the air was electric, the faint hum of the machinery mingling with the conspirators' whispered commands. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her, the knowledge that failure was not an option. With a single gesture, she gave the order. Her team moved as one, their steps silent, their weapons ready. They surrounded the chamber in moments, their presence unnoticed until it was too late. "Step away from the core," Torres commanded, her voice cutting through the air like a whip. The conspirators froze, their eyes wide with shock and fear. For a moment, no one moved. Then, one of them, a wiry figure with defiant eyes, lunged for the controls. Torres didn't hesitate. A single shot rang out, precise and controlled, striking the console and sending sparks flying. The conspirator recoiled, his defiance turning to fear as he realized the futility of his actions. "It's over," Torres said, her voice cold and unyielding. "Surrender now, or face the consequences." One by one, the conspirators dropped their weapons, their faces etched with defeat. Torres felt a surge of relief, but it was tempered by the knowledge that this was only one battle in a much larger war. The galaxy was vast, and there would always be those who sought to exploit its fragility. As the conspirators were escorted away, Torres stood alone in the chamber, staring at the stolen core. Its blue light pulsed faintly, a reminder of the power humanity wielded and the responsibility that came with it. In the days that followed, the galaxy began to rebuild. Under humanity's guidance, the Galactic Congress grew stronger, its members learning to trust one another despite their differences. The scars of the past would take time to heal, but for the first time in generations, there was hope. Humanity's role as guardians was not an easy one, but it was a role they had chosen. They had proven that peace was possible, that strength could be tempered with compassion. And though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: the age of empires was over. In its place, a new era had begun, an era of cooperation, protected by the very technology that had once been a weapon of war. As Torres watched the stars from the deck of her ship, she felt a sense of quiet pride. Humanity had not just survived, it had risen, not as conquerors, but as protectors. And in doing so, they had given the galaxy something it had long forgotten: a chance to dream of a better future.